All right, hello everybody. This is Frank Conkling, and this is the Panda Consulting ArcGIS Parcel Fabric Workshop for November. And we've got a good group here. A couple things we wanted to talk about, and some of which are directly related to our main topic here. Some of which we had asked for. A couple people had asked for a couple other things in here. One of the interesting things, and I'm looking to see whether I don't see him here yet. One of the interesting things was I had one of our clients come and say, Frank, I've got parcels that are stacked condominium parcels, and I want to know, A, how do I stack them? So let's start with that, and let's take this and let's duplicate it, and let's duplicate it just to tax parcels, and you can see it, and we now have two of them stacked. And let's do that again and duplicate them again. And now we've got four of them stacked. And let's select those four again and duplicate them. Now we have 8 of them stacked. So we're stacking those polygons on top of one another to represent condominiums. So that was the first question. How do you create those? And notice, since I went and have an active record on there, it's all getting coded with that same, the global ID of that active record. So they're all getting tagged the same way. This is part of this overall component on here. And then the question they had was, well, how do I number them? So I'm going to use a sequential numbering tool in here, and I'm going to choose that layer. This is the tax polygons, and I'm going to choose a name field on here, and I'm going to go and put them so that they increment by 1, and 04227-100 dash, and then my hashtags or pound sign components in here. This is the formatting structure for Arcade to tell it, how do I go and do this? So I can tell it to go and start at 1, and then I tell whether I want to increment, and my client is telling me that he actually wants these incremented by 10. So now I've gone through this 2-step process. The first thing is creating these stacked polygons for the condominiums, and then I'm going to go and number them all in the name field. So all I really need to do here is go and take my sequential numbering and put it through here and use that as that's the polygon that's being selected and numbered. And as you can see, it numbers 1, and then it numbers somewhere in here 10, and then 21, and then 31, and then 41, and 51. So and 61 and 71. So it goes and performs a sequential numbering on those condominiums. So I can have stacked condominium polygons in here. I created them by duplicating and duplicating and duplicating them, the number that I wanted. And then I went and used sequential numbering to go and make sure that, in fact, they are numbered correctly according to what they were looking for. All right. And I'm looking to see, oh, there's Lee. Lee, do you have audio available?
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't see when you actually joined. Did you see me do that?
I just caught that. So one of the things that I noticed that, like, we might have 10 of those stacked polygons that are in a row that increment by 10, and then it might jump 300, and then we have 60 more that are incremented by 10. So would I be able to just select those first 10, run sequential numbering on those,
Yes.
and then select the other ones and then run sequential numbering on those?
Ooh, that's going to be a little bit different, because the sequential numbering doesn't work against selection set. It only works against what you're actually going through. So I suspect what you might have to do is go and select the ones you want, and then under your layers, do with your selection, once you have them selected, go and make a separate layer from your selected features. So in essence, you're doing a definition query against them to create a sort of a selection layer, and then perform the sequential numbering against that selection layer. All right, so you can do it, but you just be aware that the sequential numbering doesn't work against selection sets. It works against a layer and everything you select in that layer. So you might want to create a separate layer of just the selected polygons to work against to do that. But you can do it. And so we can go and show that. If you want, we'll go and we'll have a meeting on that also. All right, between you and I. But yeah.
Okay, good. Well, I'll give it a shot.
Okay, good. Let me know if you have any issues with it. That's one of the issues that I've had a question on, and that's a very good hint. Something that may not be obvious is that you can do stacked polygons on here and use sequential numbering to go and manage how they are attributed. The one thing, and if you noticed it before when I had that one single polygon and I did the duplicate, by the way, there is a duplicate vertical, and it does allow you the number of times you duplicate it. So that might be a better way of doing it more than it, because it's actually then providing Z values on there. It's incrementing it by a set number of Z's. Depends upon what structure you're looking for more than anything else. Whether you want to capture the Z in there or not, that might be something that you want to look at. All right. Okay. First question answered. The second one, we have a question on, let's go and turn on the tax lines. And on here we have, I just want to show the dimensions in here when we're doing it. So the second question that we had before we started was, I want to understand better how this clip works. All right. So let me go and create a new record in here, just so I can move things away from that. And now that I've created the new record, let me go in here and do a construction on a tax parcel. All right, there is my tax parcel. Let me go and build that tax parcel so it creates the lines in here. All right, I've got the lines. Let me go and create and select all those features. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and create and update the COGO on those lines so you can see what the COGO is on there. All right. So once I've done that, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and just select that one parcel, that polygon in here, and I'm going to use that to clip against the others. And the question was, what is it actually clipping on here? And there's two ways to go and utilize the clip function inside the parcel fabric. The one is at the very bottom here, it says clip all editable features. So on here, if you have anything else turned on that you do not want to have clipped, for example, maybe if you're in a rectangular survey state, maybe you don't want to clip your sections out with your parcels, turn off those things. That's one option. Turn the layer groups off and it won't clip them. But for example, and again, there's nothing underneath here, so let's go and let's turn this on so we at least have the section on here. The other option was, rather than going and saying just clip anything, we can uncheck that, and now we have this is now dash showing us this is the feature that's going to do the clipping. And then we can go to target features and say, show us everything underneath that's going to be clipped. And these are possible clips. This doesn't necessarily mean it's going to clip them all, but will show us the 4 points that are inside of here. It'll show us the lines, the polygons in here that it overlaps, the section layers. Oh my gosh, we don't want to go and do that, do we? So let's go and unselect that for it also. So the second option takes a little bit more time, but you know exactly what's going to be clipped out of here. And again, this is just possible clips. If this parcel was located on the north or the south boundary, it would also have included in here the adjoining parcel, even though it might not necessarily clip it out. So it's whatever is touching that as far as how it gets clipped. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this off and say just do it this way and show you and go ahead and clip this. And note that what it clips, if it's got COGO values on it, will actually calculate the remaining COGO values for you on there. So when it clips out a line, when it splits a line, it actually is going to go and recalc those values on here. Let's go and look at these. So now let's look at this line here. And when we look at it, we can see that the COGO type is no longer input. It's no longer off of a deed, and it's not inverse, so it's not calculated. It is computed. When you go and clip a line that has a COGO value on there, it goes and changes the COGO type of that line into computed, meaning it calculated, it computed what the remaining value was out of that clip. All right. So, Paul, did that help at all understand better what's going on with a clip?
It does, Frank. The one question I still have is like, how does it know not to clip its own lines, like the 119.96 and the 177.73? I mean, those lines intersect that polygon. So if you said, you know, clip all editable features, how does it know which lines to clip and which lines not to clip?
Yes, so the clip itself, if we actually look, because if I were to go in here and let's undo this so that I can just see, here's my selected features in here, and I see the points, I see the lines and such. So the clip itself will not work if I have my points and my lines selected. It can only clip in here polygons on here. So then the question is a valid one. Is it intersecting these lines that are included when it figures out what it is? And the answer is it does not intersect them. They are contiguous, but it's not intersecting them, if in fact it works this way. But that was just another issue you want to understand, is that the clip itself, it's clipping one polygon by another polygon. So the clip only works and it's only active if it has a polygon, just a polygon selected, not the lines and the points and everything else. So that polygon doesn't necessarily intersect the points nor the lines when we perform the clip, but it does intersect the line underneath and it intersects the polygons in here. So does that?
So with that topology active, does that then, that, let's say the 002 parcel to the north there, does that create lines around what you clipped?
Oh yeah. And again, because we have an active record and we performed a clip on here, all right? By the way, I've got this symbolized so that if I have a record that doesn't have a name value in it, it automatically will go and make it pink, so I know I've got to go back and fix it. But if I go in here and now do a select on this, in fact, there are lines all the way around there, but those lines are actually linked to the record. They're not linked to that parcel. Again, the record is the sort of central hub on this. Everything gets linked to a record, not to the parcel itself. All right, so that, yes, it does have a line here, a line here, a line here. Matter of fact, if we go and select that line, and let's unselect everything else in here. Oh, look at that. There's a single line. That line has not been split there, but it is a single line that's left. And again, this polygon, because it has been modified by that record, that polygon is now linked as being part of that record. So the new polygon, the resulting polygon, is now tagged with the global ID of the record ID. So now if you go and research and pull back and say, show me everything that was impacted by this record, it will show you the core polygon that was created, the two resulting polygons that were created, and the lines that were used to perform that. It doesn't necessarily split these, but it just says that's the line that was drawn as part of this record. And then if we turn on historic, we will see that we have that other line that's now marked historic on here. So, and all of those things that were impacted by this record get tagged with the global ID of this record. It's a really good question. All right. So Nancy, you have a couple questions. Nancy, you can unmute yourself. There you go.
I think you answered them.
Okay, so the first question was, did the area get recomputed? The answer is not by the software, but by, in fact, if I have an attribute rule that goes and gets triggered by a change in it, a change in the parcel. So I don't know if on this data set I have an attribute rule on it. So let's go, and doesn't look like this, but let's look in here. The calculated area has not, so I don't have an attribute rule for this. But if I had an attribute rule on it, it would automatically, because I changed the shape on it, it would automatically trigger it, and it would recalculate that attribute value for me. But by default, and that's important, by default, unless you have attribute rules set up, none of this gets calculated. The resulting polygon, what we used to call the residual polygon, no name, no attributes, none of that. By the way, this attribute that's here is a result of the merge and split policy on that data set that they have. So it carries over those values, but these others, they don't get recalced until or unless you actually have a rule. Okay. Then the other question.
Kind of following along with you on my computer, and the shape area got the shape area got recomputed, right?
Yes, the shape area always does, but these individual attribute rules, the calculated area does not get recalced.
Oh, right.
And there's also a stated area, because those are sort of user-defined attributes on here. But the shape area, there it is here. That automatically, that's just a standard property of that object. So that automatically gets calculated also. Yeah. And that's just sort of standard. And then the other question you had was whether or not the others were marked historic. So if I go in here and turn these off, yes, this was the historic parcel. Here was the other historic parcel in here that got marked in here. Matter of fact, this is one that I had done sort of a add on here, but in here, yeah, that's all been marked historic on here. Let's turn this off. So there and here.
Oh.
All right. So yeah, so Paul, that was very good questions, to help clarify what's actually happening when you do a clip. You want to remember The clip only works with a selected polygon, not with lines. So if you do go in here and say, yeah, go ahead and select everything associated with this active record, you have to only select polygons for it. All right. And then B, it's going to clip anything, but it's going to mark everything that gets changed with the global ID of the record on here. All right. Hopefully that helped a little bit. All right, thank you. Good
Yep,
question.
thanks, Frank.
Yeah. So today we wanted to focus on a couple things about cleaning up data and sort of put it more into alignment and helping it go and become a better data set than what's in there right now. And if we look in here, this actually was a data set that I had worked on I think last month, in which I rebuilt this subdivision in here. And when we go through here, we notice things such as, and if I turn on my historic parcels, I had put some lines in here and redid things, and I did all sorts of things in here. And I've got some misalignments now. On this area here, I've got residual points in here that need to get cleaned up. I've got extra points down here. So one of the questions I'm often asked is, how do I clean this stuff up? How do I get rid of this? And there's a couple of tools in here that will help you with this. All right. One of them is, and again, is one of my favorite tools, is the Align Features tool. Align Features can go and get rid of a lot of blemishes, a lot of issues that you have with your data. So I'm going to go and do an Align Features on here. Now this is important. You want to be aware that with Align Features, it's going to go and include topology rules with it to figure out whether or not these elements can go and be changed dramatically. And let me give you a prime example of this. Let me turn off my active record so I can go in here now and do an align feature, and let's make it like 5 foot wide. And very simply, if I come in here and say I want to go and align this so that all of these points that are within my tolerance go and disappear, my points go over here. Well, this connection line and these tolerances, these vertices on my connection line, there's no problem moving them in. But over here, if I actually go in here and zoom enough, I actually have a separate line there. And if I have my topology rules in place, when I do the align features, it should give me an error and saying, you can't do that because you're going to be removing a line on here. So no feature geometry can be aligned using this method in tolerance. Doesn't make a lot of sense, but what it's really saying is that it can't do this because it's going to delete things or remove things. So I'm going to go over to my edit tab and go to my turn off my topology. Now go in here and do this exact same thing. And I'm going to start here and go to here. All right, the exact same thing. The only difference is I have my topology turned off. So again, a couple things. I have no active record. I don't want this to trace what I'm doing because this is cleanup. No active record and no topology on here. And now when I do this alignment here, it then goes and does it. So one of the issues that most people have with this is that when they use the align features tool, you have to be aware of whether or not those alignments that you're doing, whether it's going to remove or delete the existing features that are in there. How is it going to impact them? You cannot go with topology turned on and tell it to go and delete a line, or to go and change points so that it goes and compresses out of existence an individual line on there. You cannot do that. All right, that's the first thing. So second thing, maybe I want to go and remove this line here, or this point here, and make it so that it's only one point in here. The first thing you might try doing is saying, well, let's do this same sort of thing here on here. And if we think about it, what this is actually doing is it's going to go and take the points or any vertices within here and compress them to that path. That's not going to eliminate that line for me at all. It's just going to, if anything, if I have a vertex at the other end of the other line, it's going to remove that. In order to remove that line, to use this tool, I'm going to go and use it a different way. I'm going to start here, go here, and then I'm going to go up to here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to expand this tolerance so that it incorporates that other point there. I'm also, to make sure I don't impact that up there, I'm going to make this square at the end so it doesn't go and change in any way that curve. All right. So when I do this, again, no topology, no record, just cleaning this information up, it should move this vertex over to this point here, and then it should remove that existing line in there for me. All right. Alignments. Same thing over here. I can use this tool to go and say, all right, let's align this to here. And notice it's not going to grab that. And then align this to here. All right. And let's go and leave it at that. So if I want to go and bring that line over and this line over, I have to change my tolerance to maybe 35 feet because I'm doing it that far over. And then I'll have to change it so that I make sure that on the end it rounds and includes that vertex in here. And it includes that vertex and pulls them over. Okay. This is by far one of the best tools we've found for cleaning things up, realigning them as you go along. You do want to make sure that you understand how this is actually working. So on here, let me go here. Let me go to my corner here. And then let me go to my corner here. Let me go to my corner here. Again, I want to make sure that I understand what's going to happen. If I leave it at this vertex is going to move over, this one's going to move over, that one will probably move over, these will be compressed. I think 35 is a little bit too big. Let's maybe make it 20 instead in here. So I can understand what's actually going to happen in here. Again, no topology, no record, so that it's not making any major changes on here. All right. So I can go and do that. It goes and makes and pulls all those vertices together on here as I'm looking at this. Still doesn't eliminate this vertex. In order to do that, I might have to go in here and say, and then I want to go and square it. I want to be careful what's going to happen with the curve to go and do that. And then look at what happened here. Again, it went and did that. So be aware that while this is intersecting things, it can cause issues. All right, some general alignment elements in here. the best thing to do is to go and experiment with the Align Features tool so you understand a little bit better what it's doing, the differences between having a rounded end on it or a square end on here, how it's going to impact the intersecting elements. I can tell you that in areas where you have, for example, a cusp or a turn, a point, you want to be careful and be on the inside of it, not the outside of it, because the outside of it will go and pull lines over and cause problems on there. It is one of those things where it's sort of an acquired skill. You want to make sure that you understand what's going to happen in here. So what happens if I want to try to eliminate this point here? How can I do that? If I go here to here and I make this 35 feet wide, let's make it 40 feet wide. Obviously, it's going to impact everything on this side. So perhaps I make it on my left side only. All right. And make it rounded on that side and see if it will bring that in here. In this case, it did something, but I can tell you I probably have some historic element in here that's preventing it from completely removing that line. But it pulled the one point over, but it did not, because there's probably something in here, historic levels or something like that, that's preventing it. It will work against the elements that I have on here. All right, so Tori, sorry to get rambling. What questions do you have?
Turn on the mic. Okay, but I'm creating records, the missing records. How do I make sure there's no superfluous lines, multiple extra lines left over once I've done an area?
It's an interesting question.
I see lots of lines.
Let's start with this. Every line, and let's go back here just sort of to reaffirm this. So the rules, let's start here. The rules on the parcel fabric is that every line is supposed to have a record associated with it. It's supposed to be tagged with the global ID of a record. All right. So you can start by this. Theoretically, if you have lines that have no values in the created by field, that's not associated with a record. So you should be able to go and delete that without it impacting, the next build or anything else on here. All right, that's the first thing. Make sure all of your lines have a record associated with them. All right? If it doesn't have a record on here, there's two things you can do. You can delete that line and then rebuild the parcel fabric just to make sure that it doesn't impact anything, or you can select that line and then select a record to associate it with, and then go and select the line. Well, first let's go back here, turn an active record on, and then take and have a selected feature and assign that feature to the record. So you can rebuild that one of two ways. Either delete the line and rebuild it to make sure it is associated with a record, or take the feature and manually associate it with a record. But that's the first question. Do you have superfluous lines that are not associated with a record? All right. Because the only lines you're supposed to have in your parcel fabric feature classes are supposed to be associated with a record, which means they have a value in your created by field.
Okay, what about the ones that were imported?
There's the rub, right? Yeah, we have found that there are some, shall we say, issues with that, in that you often can import an ArcMap parcel fabric and because of the way that upgrade script works, the way it's supposed to work is it takes every plan that you have in your plan table, and then because in the ArcMap Parcel Fabric, the plans are associated with polygons and with lines, goes through them, and for every plan, it finds the parcel associated with it, and then also finds the lines associated with that, because your lines are supposed to be associated with plans. All right. Again, within the ArcMap Parcel Fabric, instead of records, they're all plans in a plan table. You're supposed to have polygon plan IDs, and you're supposed to have line plan IDs. Well, if you never use plans, it's easy. It's relatively easy to go and associate your polygons with the line, with the plans. The more problematic one is, how do you associate the lines with the plans? Because you have lines on top of lines on top of lines inside of ArcMap. So often what will happen, again, the upgrade script, it takes the plan, goes and identifies every polygon that's associated with it, and then uses, if it has a plan ID on the lines, it uses those plans ID. And if there's nothing else associated, it brings it in without the lines in, and then supposedly builds it. But what we're finding is that often it will use topology to figure out what's associated or what's connected up, and bring that in without it actually having a plan ID, in which case you wind up with lines that don't have record values on them. And we have not found yet an easy way to go and reassociate with those. It's almost like the best way to do that is to take the area and build the parcel fabric. And again, building the parcel fabric will make sure that every record has a polygon, and then a polygon has lines that go to build it that are associated with the record. All right. So it rebuilds. If you're missing lines, it rebuilds them, but it doesn't necessarily delete lines that aren't associated with a record. All right. So if you go in there and build them, you then should be able to go and delete those lines that do not have a record associated with them. And I know your next question, because I know you, Tori, is going to be, well, what do I do about the COGO values that are on those?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is, again, there's not an easy way to go and make sure that you capture that. You might try doing a near function to go and see if you can figure out what it's close to and do that, or maybe use an arcade function to go and capture what's on there. I wish I could say there was an easy way to do it. Manually, you might use an attribute transfer, where you click on the line and you take the attributes and copy it over to that one that has a record on it.
Sounds like it might be easier just to build the parcels and not worry about the lines until builds.
So I can share this with you. We're going through, for some of our clients, going through here and doing an analysis. What is the best practice now? And one of the options that we have, there's two options to take an existing ArcMap parcel fabric and bring it in. And they depend upon whether or not the COGO values that are stored in that ArcMap parcel fabric are worth anything, or whether they were all just inversed. If they are not worth anything, what you can do is, rather than doing an upgrade, you can export out those polygons, again, by doing definition queries against them, and say, okay, now take all of my tax polygons and export those out, and then build that from scratch. And when you build it from scratch, you're going to import or append or load, whatever verb you want to say, you're going to import them into an empty feature class, a tax polygon feature class. You're going to bring them in. And then what you're going to do is you're going to do a create parcel record, which says for every polygon that I have in this feature class, create a record for it. And then you go and you say, okay, now build the records, build the extents and build the records. And what it does is it looks at the records, then looks at the polygons. And if it's missing lines, it creates the lines. If it's missing points, it creates points. So the second option for migrating an ArcMap parcel fabric is dependent upon whether or not you want to store or you want to maintain the COGO values that are in there. Because you do have either the upgrade script or build it from scratch. And I can kind of share with you that from our experience, and again, it's dependent upon the individual organization and whether or not they used those COGO values at all before. If you didn't use them, it's cleaner to go and build it from scratch. But if you did have things in there that you really want to preserve, then you can take that messy structure and try to capture as much of it as possible. What we know there are issues with it. Plan table, lines that don't come across all the way, you lose connection lines, there's all sorts of issues with it, but there is a way to go and do that. Good question on here though. Thank you. All right, so what else was I going to talk about here? The alignments, we talked about the alignments and what they're doing, some of the ways to clean up things. What I did want to go is show you is talk at least a little bit about the adjustment component in here. So what I'm going to do is if you were here last week, there's a subdivision here, this subdivision, and I'm going to go and just select those polygons in here. That subdivision didn't fit very well at all. So what we did is we built the subdivision. We had a ground to grid rotation that we applied to it. We did not apply a scale factor, but we sort of made it fit. We built it, adjusted it so that it fit inside the area here, made some adjustments, and then we took that subdivision polygon using our same ground to grid. We built lots, and then we built tax parcels from it. So we've got a lot of COGO value here, but some of which it doesn't fit real well. So because we have lines with COGO values on here, and because we know that there was issues with what we had in here, I thought that this might be a really good sample set to go and look at how you apply the least squares element on here and what this is actually doing on here. So right now I've got the lines and the polygons on here. Let me go and open up the Analyze by Least Squares adjustment here. Oh, I have a selection set here. So it's going to look at these values that I have on here. Import data set does not exist. I bet because I actually went in here and redefined this. Sorry, I actually renamed this on here. I may have to go in and do this on an empty one instead. Do a consistency check. All right. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a consistency check. I have no control points in here. This is merely going to go and take the COGO values that are stored on these lines and figure out whether or not they are reflective of what these should be. In essence, this is doing a comparison of what's drawn on here and how these lines are actually represented. All right, and so I'm just going to go and run this. And let's see what the results are. So what it actually does is it goes and creates an adjustment grouping, a group of adjustment layers on here for me. And it's actually taking a whole lot longer now than it did when I ran it earlier. All right. Too high in here. Okay. So what it did is it created an analysis group here. This analysis group is a series of adjustment vectors, adjustment points, adjustment lines. And what these represent, this represents the adjustment of the vectors as far as the lines. How far is it actually going to go and adjust these? And you can see they go from anywhere from 1.8 feet to 41 feet as far as the vectors. Here's the points that as far as where it's going to be adjusted, and here's the lines. It shows the distance set, difference as far as the latitude. So let me unselect this and actually go in here and look at this. Like there's some of these in here. So what winds up happening is that it shows me, where each of these points are going to be moving as such, where they would be moving if in fact I use the values that are stored on here to go and make this fit. Now internally, you can see there isn't a whole lot of movement here as far as where it's going and what it's doing. Some of what I'm seeing here is in fact, I just did some movements on here in which I actually aligned some of these aligns and put some changes in here. But there's elements on here, such as a line value in here that says there's a big change in this line. It might be the distance, it might be the bearing on here. I can do some labeling on here to go and let me see. Here, this is a direction of an outlier without here. And these are different geodetic changes that might occur on here. So I can see again the amount of adjustment that's going to occur, the actual array ellipses as far as what sort of confidence they have in these alignments. You can see up here there's a lot of, if you recall, last week I did a whole lot of fiddling up here to make it fit because it didn't fit within. It did not fit within the existing parcels here that I had. It just didn't fit. I moved them around. I did a whole bunch of things in here. And I selected these, by the way, when I did that, because the subdivision itself only was this, but I happened to select this, which I had adjusted again with the Kogo values afterwards. So let's start here or stop here and say, okay, what questions do we have about this and what it's actually showing us? That sort of thing. Do we have any questions?
None in the chat right now.
Wow, really? Okay. So again, I came back to this subdivision. I can, Nancy. Where do you want to go? Any place specific? So this is in fact showing me that this point here would move over about 4.31 from where the actual bearings and distances that are recorded on here. So the analyzed parcels by least squares consistency check doesn't look at control points. It only looks at the overall network and says, do these map out consistent with the values that you have stored on here, the bearings and the distances on here? And this is what that's actually showing us. Does this map out consistent with those values that are stored? Or is there some difference in here between these on here? All right. Does the new LSA do a better job in your rural areas? Or is it still better for more than urban areas like the central LSA? So that was just Ryan's question. And that's a really good question. I'm still testing this. I'm still trying to see what's going on here, as far as what's happening and what really these things are showing us. So one of the things I like about this is that before it even goes and shows us anything, it actually goes and provides us with this sort of display. This is what would happen if you actually apply that. Now, if I go back here, there's also another tool where I can actually, so if we look, this first tool here is analyze, and this second tool is apply. So it's a two-step process. The first one is, let's look at what could happen. Let's look at what would happen. And it would allow us to go and analyze this and see where the minor changes are, the ones in yellow, the orange ones, which are a little bit bigger changes, and then the red ones, which are more of the dramatic changes in here. It will allow us to analyze those. And we can go in and sort of look at it again and readjust it and such. So it is a consistency check. It just checks to see whether there's consistencies without it. There's also a more intensive part of here in which you can tell it, no, you want to do a full-blown least squares adjustment in which you have control points in here and that sort of thing. A little bit more intense. Unfortunately, in this data set, I don't have control points, but it would allow you to do the same thing. So to answer your question, it's a two-step process. It's apply the analysis or analyze it. And then actually, once you've got done with that analysis, you can then apply it, and it moves these points over to where these elements are telling you it would be moved to there. And it readjusts it to fit all of that. So if I go and do this, and I haven't done this yet, and then it says, okay, you can go ahead and the tolerance here is this. Let's see what actually happens when I apply this on here. Again, I've not run this yet, so I will see what happens while it updates this. Also, so now we've got some other questions.
We do.
Okay,
Jeff, do you want me to read it to you?
sure.
Jeff has a question. He says, have you noticed any bugs when applying these adjustments? I've seen around the edges, the adjustments will actually pull the polygons off the points and create some slivers between polygons it's pulling off from.
So we can answer that right here. We can see that we've gone and applied an adjustment here. And notice we only had the tax parcels on here. And so it went and adjusted some of those tax parcels, but it did not adjust the subdivision, didn't adjust anything else that we did not have selected. So that's one of the first things I've found, is that you want to make sure that everything is included in your analysis if you've got a complex structure in here. But how do I say this? So I'm also doing some testing on 2.7, and there's some new functions inside of there. And I have exactly noticed that same thing, Jeff, that you were talking about, where in moving points with some of these new functions, the polygon moves off of them. And I've not been able to go and fully replicate it. The problem is that I don't notice it when I'm doing it. So it becomes a little problematic as far as troubleshooting and reporting the bug. But yes, I've seen that sort of thing occur on this. I would just be very careful with this to make sure that you understand what it's actually going to be doing here. There's some things in here that did get adjusted, some that did not. It looks like this is fine. We still have some other points there. And again, other points just means that in fact, but it did not adjust in any way the subdivision, because this was topology issue here, that as we move the point, it should have bent that also. So yeah, Jeff, there are some issues in here. Regarding Ryan's question, urban versus rural, I've not tested it enough yet to say it works better on one versus the other. I'm still in the very preliminary testing portion of it. All right. Jeff, sounds like you've already done some of this. Can you put on your mic and share with us some of the things that you've done? You're still doing testing. You answered it perfectly. Thank you. Let's we can address some of these issues in 2.7. Yeah. So
Frank, we're adjusting more on from a. I mean, we're not in fully production yet in Pro. I'm just doing some testing on it, but
yeah,
kind of some of the preliminary things that I've seen, we're seeing, well, because we're not really doing it from like a tax parcel standpoint. We're doing it from a PLSS,
right,
CAD, and SDI standpoint.
So Jeff,
And when we're adjusting,
you might introduce yourself so everybody understands you don't work for a property appraiser, you work for the BLM. I
work for the Montana State Library, but
yeah.
we partner with the BLM to be one of the data stewards for the CAD and SDI.
Yeah.
And what I've been noticing is when we're adjusting to certain control outside those areas, so like in this example, basically outside that subdivision, we're seeing it being pulled away. So basically everything the adjustment's not moving everything, snapping it properly. Yeah. That's my concern. So it's introducing all these slivers around your adjusted area.
Yeah, exactly. And you actually can see this right here, in that you've got the point moved, the line moved, but that polygon didn't move. So let's get in here. There's that polygon right there. That polygon did not get adjusted or changed at all. Even though the lines got changed and the corners got changed, the polygons didn't. So the question is, if I go in here and rebuild this, will it then rebuild that polygon to make it correct? No. What it did is it took the polygon and make sure that the lines and the corners were rebuilt on it. So yeah, I would not put this into production yet until we get a better understanding of what this really is doing for all of it on here. But
Frank, if I could chime in one more time.
Oh, please.
Do you think this is just something that, because obviously this least squared is something new. Is this something that you think Esri is just going to continually develop as they release their latest versions?
Yes. Yes, I think it's important enough that I think Esri is going to continue with this. This 2.6 implementation is the first implementation of taking the DynaJust least squares engine and integrating it in. And now they're sort of working through, okay, so what is it that isn't getting modified or isn't getting changed in any way with this? So, again, from my standpoint, I would consider the least squares adjustment right now and the functionality to go and do that as sort of a beta test. I wouldn't put it on my full production data yet, but I would start experimenting with seeing, well, what is this thing doing and how is it working? Those sorts of things on here. I'm very optimistic on here as far as where they're going with it. Now it's a matter of, okay, so now let's identify the tweaks that they have to do to make sure that it pulls everything from that engine and applies it. It's my understanding that one of the things it does is it actually takes the individual points and utilizes the points to go, and that reminds me, it did reset my topology on here. So it's my understanding that what it does, it takes the points and moves the points, and then using the topology, it from those points, it goes and readjusts the lines and the polygons that are associated with them. So the only question is whether or not moving a point is going to go and result in that polygon also being moved. And again, I'm seeing something like that happening in 2.7 with another function that's being built in there. So I think that's we got to make sure that that topology gets reinforced, and it gets reinforced beyond what normally happens with topology. And what I mean by that is, let's see where, if I go in here and I select a point, all right, I have topology on. If I select a point and then go and say, let's go ahead and, come on, move that point. Now, since I have topology, why is it not doing it? Even if I have map topology. Okay. Notice, while it's within the normal constraints, it follows what topology should be doing. It makes sure that everything that's connected to it stays connected to it. But once I exceed and move it outside of that, notice what happens. It no longer is connected in there. It breaks the topology. And my only question or my only suspicion is that what we just experienced over here, in which it took and moved the points? It moved the points, but it moved them beyond what topology would have let it change. And again, I'm just sort of raises the question more than anything else on here. So yes, you can use this right now. I would say that you want to check to make sure whether or not it's going beyond what the normal topology component will be on here. Try to move that point that was moved. Sorry, Nancy. So if I go back in here and click on this point, and then I try to move it, right now I'm moving, again, I have map topology on here. I'm moving this and it's reconnecting all that stuff. Now if I go in here and move it again.
She says that she means the adjusted side.
Ah, okay, sorry, Nancy. So if I go in here and say, let's move this down to here, and notice this is using right now map topology, I can do that. But again, the thing that bothers me is it's moving and not necessarily following the points that are in here. So if I go back here also to this topology, go to move this, and this is where I'm not sure what's going on here. It's not using the rule-based topology, but it will use map topology at the moment. Things we have to explore still, things that we have to figure out what's going on in here a little bit better. But yeah, it is weird, Nancy, it is weird. So, all right, so that was one of the things I wanted to do on here. Let's see if I have, I also had some other things in here because there's other elements in here. So by the way, that's as far as I want to talk about least squares adjustment on here. All right. But there are other types of adjustments that can occur on this. And this sort of leads into this second discussion on here, in that what we talked about was the fact that within the parcel fabric, how it's supposed to work is that as a point moves, anything that's connected to that point is supposed to be modified. It's supposed to be changed, what happens on here. So I've got another data set here, and inside of here, let's go and do a couple things here. Let's just see, this right now has the on here, and oh, that's a control point. I can't move that. So if I go in here and just try to move this, and notice this here is now working in this one. So as I move this, it goes and moves it, and so again, that's the way it's supposed to work. And so one of the things that they have is they have the ability to go and import new control points for it. So there is a geoprocessing tool called Import Parcel Fabric Points. All right. Now what these Import Parcel Fabric Points allow you to do is they allow you to go and take a shapefile of any sort that has points or coordinate values on them and import them. And if they have, and there's a couple different ways that you can do this. You can do this by proximity. You can do this by name field, or you can do this by global ID. If they have some correspondence between these points in a shapefile and the points in your parcel fabric, if they have those, it will go and take your existing parcel fabric points, whether they're control points or not, and move them over to match the current points that you're trying to move them on. You're basically importing new lines in and replacing the ones you have with these new elements in here. In the ArcMap parcel fabric, they called this load control points. Inside here now, this is now actually import parcel fabric points. And it asks you, what's the source? What's the fabric that you're pulling it in? Do you want to associate with this with a record? You don't have to. That's purely optional. And note, required. The rest of this is all optional. The match point method is how are you going to match this within a certain proximity. You tell it how far away from the existing things, and it will take whatever's existing within that and move it together with it. Or the name and the proximity, or the global ID and the proximity. And then what's your search tolerance? What's your proximity that you want it to search out? Then what type of attribution, what type of change do you want to update? You want to update just the geometry, or do you want to retire and replace your old points with these new points in here? And if you look, one of the elements in here is that they have constrained or control points, and then they have current points and retired points in here, so that this geoprocessing tool, and this is at 2.6. Matter of fact, this all the way goes back to 2.5, maybe even 2.4. Can do that. And then finally, there's the ability to go and create a table, which if you have any conflicts in here, be able to go and input those. So let me go in and just play around with this. We've got a little bit of time left. And let me go and turn those off. Let me just select that point there, just to make sure I have the right point here. This is not a control point. Oh, it actually is a control point. And Let's see if I can move this. Again, I created this very quickly. Move that and say, go ahead and save that. There it is there. Let me measure how far this is. So that's 27 feet. Wow. All right. I better move that closer. Only because I know that there's some control points in here that are actually within 27 feet of one another. All right. So here, turn on these control points again. So let me go back to this geoprocessing tool and say, let's take our control points feature class, which is this shapefile here, migrate it into the parcel fabric, and let's do it both with, let's just do proximity. And let's say 20 feet, all right? And upgrade everything. And then I'm going to create a table. Yeah. And I might have to be an existing one. Okay, let's see if we can do this. And if I get an error, parameters missing, or so I might have to create a table out here. All right. And let's see if this works. One of the joys of doing demos on the fly is you never know what's gonna fail, what's gonna succeed on here, and such. So let's go ahead and say import these, put any conflicts in the conflicts table, and go and do that. And look at that. So it redefined the location of that control point, of that point. I shouldn't even say control point. It just so happens it was a control point. Again, see, one of the problems that happens is because of relying upon the topology, if we have issues with interim points here, it's going to have the topology only change what's directly connected to that point, not all the way down through here. So you'd have to go in here and do readjustments. But in that instance where you've got new points coming in here, you can actually go and have it go and perform the adjustments on here. Now, again, it depends on whether or not you've got clean lines in here. If you don't have clean lines in here, how would you go and fix this? Well, I know what my favorite thing is. Let's go and just go and draw a line here and connect this one up to this one. And align those up to re-straighten out those lines. Again, the reliance upon topology, it's both good and it's bad. Then we'll have to see what happens. This function here, the import parcel fabric points, only goes for individual points. So the question is, can we go and do something like that where I've taken all of these points, and these are actually exports out of this point feature class. So every single point I just moved. And I selected them all, and then I did a move to, and just said, yeah, foot over, and go and do that. So let's see what happens when we do now the adjustment points. Yeah, that one there. Let's do proximity. Let's do and update everything. And let's go And let's say test 2, just to go and do this and see if it will adjust every single point inside of my parcel fabric. Again, I did proximity, but I could have done the name field or the global ID field in here to go and do that. And let's just see again what happens on here. Did not. It took this one here, but this did not do anything with these over here. Perhaps I should have done it with global ID to make sure. So let's go ahead and run that again with global ID and see what's happening. Nope, didn't seem to do anything on there. So let's go and look at the table and see what conflicts there might be. Here's the distance, here's the target ID on here. Doesn't tell me a whole lot other than the proximity, and it should have been within that same proximity. So again, it's another one of the functions, kind of works by topology, but I'm not sure what this is doing, whether it's useful at all in here. All right, I've gone through everything that we wanted to talk about. I did have one other question. Someone was asking me when I did, and I forget where I actually did that. Where did I do that? Oh, let me go to my manage records and show me everything that I did in the last. Come on, after here. So let's go to this one. Let's make this our active record and let's zoom to it. Come on. Well, I'll just recreate what I was doing. So on here, the question was when we went and created, what we did is we created a polygon, and then we built that polygon here. Built that polygon, and then went and just sort of to there's that polygon, doesn't have anything on it. Let's just go and select the polygon. Let's do a clip against that and clip against everything else. On here, the question was, when I turned on the historic lines, it was shown as a red dashed line. The question was, is there a way to go and show that with different symbology? And the answer is sure. That's actually easy to do. If I wanted to, all I have to do is go in here to this and say, well, let me go and make that a gray line. Again, I can turn off my historic polygons and just have that. I can make that a gray line, and then I can make the dash effect. I can make it a dash line, maybe make it a little bit bigger and apply that. And now that's a dash line coming across there. So Angela, is that what you were looking for? Or Angel, is that what you were looking for? All right. Is there any other questions on here? Anything else on here? We went and covered an awful lot in here, some of which was directly related to the adjustments and alignment issue. What other questions might we have on this as far as what we're doing here, that sort of thing? Last chance. I'm going to end this unless somebody asks a question.
There's nothing in the chat.
All right, so we're about 80 minutes in. Let's go ahead and stop the recording, and let's transition out of this into office hours. Thanks for attending, and we hope you enjoyed this workshop. If you have questions, would like some more details about anything we discussed during this workshop, or if you or anyone at your organization would like information about training, support, or ways in which we can help you with your GIS needs, please contact me at frank@pandaconsulting.com or call me at 561-691-3277, and we can discuss how we can help you with your needs.